Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I'm making this video for people that are new to Nmap, and I'll be telling you about the 6 main scans everyone should know. The first one is a basic SYN scan or a default scan. It's the most common scan and considered a very stealthy scan compared to a full TCP connection scan. The use for this scan is to identify open ports, the state, and the service very quickly without initiating a full connection. In other words, this type of scan is not easily detectable. So the command for the scan would be nmap space and then the target IP, which for me it would be 4.33.32.1.6. So it scans the 1,000 most common ports out of the 65,535 ports that exist. This basic scan gives us a quick look at which ports are open, closed, or filtered, and what services might be running behind them. So here we can see that 995 of the ports are closed, which means that 5 would be open and they would be over here. So we can see that port 22 is open, port 25 is filtered, port 80 is open, and so on. We can also see the service over here. So that's all that scan does. So the second scan we are going to do is called a service version detection. And as the name implies, the scan identifies the services running on open ports and attempts to detect the version of each service. This is important because knowing not just what service is running, but also which version can give us valuable information. Certain versions of software may have known vulnerabilities. This demand for the scan would be nmap /s capital V and then the target IP. So let's say we run the scan on the same target that we just did. So nmap -s capital V 45.33.32.156. So now instead of seeing an open port, we're going to get detailed information about what's actually running on those ports once it loads. So this scan does take a little bit longer than the previous one. So let's see. So for example, port 80 is open and we can see that it's running on Apache HTTP 2.4.7. So understanding the version helps us figure out whether the software is up to date or if it might be vulnerable to certain exploits. So next up, we have the operating system detection scan. This is really useful when you want to get a sense of what operating system the target is running. Nmap tries to detect the OS based on how the system responds to network probes, and it can give you an estimate of whether the target is running something like Linux kernel or Windows 10. But there's one important point. So OS detection requires root or administrative privileges, and this is because Nmap needs more access to the system to send and analyze low-level network traffic. So if you're on Linux or Mac OS like me, you'll need to add sudo to your command and run it with, in order to run it with elevated privileges. The command would look something like this: sudo nmap dash capital O and then the target IP over here. And then when you press enter, it's going to ask you for your password. So just type it in. It's not going to look like you're typing in anything, but just type in your password and press enter and it should work. So once you enter your password, Nmap will have the necessary permissions to run the OS detection. For Windows users, you need to run the command prompt or PowerShell as an administrator and then run the command as usual, which is nmap space -o and then the target IP. So don't add sudo if you're on Windows. This scan will provide you with an estimate of the target's operating system, and knowing the operating system can be useful if you're trying to identify potential vulnerabilities specific to that OS. For example, some exploits may only work on certain versions of Windows or specific Linux kernels. So That's this scan. The fourth scan we're going to cover is called an aggressive scan. This one combines a lot of features into one command. It does service version detection, like the scan we just talked about, OS detection, it runs Nmap scripts for vulnerability detection, and it also does a trace route to map out the network path to the target. The command for this is nmap dash capital A and then the target IP. Um, so while this scan is super useful because it gives you a ton of information, it's called aggressive for a reason. It's not as stealthy and can trigger security systems, so be careful where you use it. But if you're in a test environment or have permission, the scan can save a lot of time by gathering all the data in one go. So here we can see all of the information that it gives us. Now let's talk about UDP scanning. Up until now, we've been talking about scanning TCP ports, which is the default for Nmap, but some services use UDP instead, like DNS on port 53 or SNMP on port 161. UDP doesn't have the same kind of error checking as TCP, so scanning it can be a bit slower and less reliable. But if you're looking for services that run on UDP, this scan is what you'll need. The command for UDP scan is nmap um, nmap dash small case s capital case u and then the target IP. But because I'm on a Mac and I need administrative privileges to use this, I have to type in sudo and then the command. So nmap dash small case s capital case u and then the target IP. So this will scan for open UDP ports. So let me just type in my password. So this will scan for open UDP ports on the target. Just remember that UDP scans can take longer because of the way the protocol works, but they're essential for finding services that TCP scans might miss. So this might take a little while, so I'm just going to skip until it's done running the command. The scan revealed that port 123 UDP, which is used by the NTP service, is open, while many other ports are either closed or in a open/filtered state. The warning up at the top over here, the warning, giving up on port because retransmission cap hit 10 means that Nmap tried probing certain UDP ports but didn't receive a response after multiple attempts, 10 retries in this case. UDP is a connectionless protocol, so it's common for these probes to fail without receiving any feedback. The scan took about, wait, this scan took a long time, about 30 minutes, which is common for UDP scans due to the need for repeated retransmissions and the slower nature of UDP scanning. Finally, we have the full port scan, also known as a port range scan. By default, Nmap only scans the 1000 most common ports, but what if the service you're looking for is running on a non-standard port? For that, we need to use a full port scan, which checks all 65,535 ports on the target. The command is nmap dash small case p dash space and then the target IP. This scan will give you a complete overview of every open port on the target, no matter where the service is running. It's a great way to find hidden or non-standard services that a basic scan might miss, but keep in mind it can take longer since it's scanning all possible ports. And here's the results of that scan. So that took quite a long time as well. And that was all 6 scans. So there you have it. Those are the 6 essential Nmap scans that everybody should know. I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll answer them.